you here this morning. For this week, Wednesday night, everyone is welcome to join us for a Bible study. The topic will be 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So go ahead, study it at home already, and bring some thoughts. Let's bow our heads for a prayer. Father God, I thank you for this new day. Thank you for your protection over us, for allowing us to get together here again and worship you together as a church family. God, I just pray that we would humble ourselves to you, that we would surrender whatever we keep higher than you. And Father, I just pray that we would let your word sink in and that we would let it grow in our lives. This I pray in your holy name. Amen.
My God is the strength of my soul.
love defends me. And when I feel like I'm all alone, your love defends me. Your love defends me. We sing hallelujah. You're my portion, my salvation. Hallelujah. Surely my God is the strength of my soul. Your love defends me. Your love defends me. And when I feel like I'm all alone, your love defends me. Your love defends me. Surely my God is the strength of my soul. Your love defends me. Your love defends me. And when I feel like I'm all alone, your love defends me. Your love defends me. We sing hallelujah. You're my portion, my salvation. Hallelujah. You're my portion, my salvation. Hallelujah. You're my portion, my salvation. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Whose love is mighty and so much stronger? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder? The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You lay down your life. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory. Who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place.
Good morning. Welcome to this worship service here. Thank you for the great worship music there, for leading that, and I appreciate that always. It's good to praise God. The message for this morning that the Lord laid on my heart is, "Are you ready?" is what I've entitled this message. And it's a question that each one of us has to deal with for ourselves, but we deal with this using biblical standards and how we discern. Are we ready? Are we ready for what, right? Are we ready? And there's a lot of things that I'm gonna go over a few of the things that we need to be ready for in this. I'm trying to get my thing to work here. That's why I'm just looking down here. But anyway, there we go. Almost. Anyway. Okay, so you can't see what's going on here, so that's good. Jesus warns us to be ready. He warns us to be ready in season and out of season. He warns us, he encourages us to be ready for ultimately for the second coming, for meeting the Lord in the air. We need to be ready for that, and we want to be ready for that. And that's the whole purpose of us gathering here together. We want to encourage each other, build each other up, and be ready for when that great day comes, when we hear that cry, "Behold, the bridegroom is coming." And that's an event that none of us wants to miss. I'm going to talk about that parable a little bit today. I'm actually going to read the passage. It's in Matthew 25, verses 1 through 13. That's the text passage for this morning. And it's about a wedding. And we'll read that in a little bit, but I'm going to talk about what's going on here just a little bit. Or if we don't understand Jewish traditions, then some of this stuff is not going to make a whole lot of sense to us. So I'm going to go over it a little bit. There's a book called Here Comes the Bride by a man named Richard Booker. I haven't read the whole book, but I've read some excerpts from it. And it gave me some insights into what's going on over here. And Jesus was real big on weddings, if you've ever noticed that. He was real big on weddings. He called the church his bride. And, he uses all sort of metaphors, and they're about weddings. And as we study this, we'll probably learn that he actually used more metaphors relating to weddings than we actually knew about. We probably didn't know that these were metaphors for weddings. But anyway, we know that Jesus attended at least one wedding. John 2, verses 1 through 11, he attended a wedding in Cana. Actually, that was at the very start of his ministry. And so our weddings today are quite a bit different from the Jewish cultural weddings of especially from back in that day. I don't know how strictly they've adhered to that. I know some of the things have carried over for today. So I'll just read a few little excerpts from Here Comes the Bride by Richard Booker. This book points out the significance this book points out how Jewish wedding customs are significant for the Christian in the same way as the other feasts of Israel. And so we'll probably recognize some references that Jesus makes about two weddings that we didn't know were about weddings before. Okay, so first of all, there was the betrothal, or the engagement as we would call it nowadays. Anyway, the betrothal was binding. So once the bride agrees to marry the groom, that's a binding agreement, and could only be undone by a divorce with proper grounds, such as the bride being found not to be a virgin, as in Matthew 1, verses 18 to 19, Joseph and Mary. Joseph sought to put Mary away secretly because she was found to be pregnant. But anyway, so the young man would make a marriage contract or covenant, which he presented to the intended bride and her father. Included in this was a bride price, which was appropriate in that society to compensate the young woman's parents for the cost of raising her, as well as being an expression of his love for her. And then there was the acceptance. So to see if this proposal was accepted, the young man would pour a cup of wine and set it in front of his beloved, and he would stand back and wait to see if she would drink that cup. If she did, then she agreed to this, and that was actually a binding gesture she would make by by drinking that cup. And they would be betrothed or engaged then. And then the young man would give gifts to this girl, and then he would take his leave. And the young man and the young woman would wait for the young man to return to come get her, because the young man would leave. And before he would leave, he would announce, "I am going to prepare a place for you. I will return for you when it is ready." Does that reference sound familiar? That's what Jesus said, right? When he ascended into heaven. "I am going to prepare a place for you. I will return for you when it's ready." That is what the groom would say to his bride after they were engaged. And so the usual practice was for a young man to return to his father's house and build a honeymoon room there. That's pretty romantic, isn't it? I think some of us were raised in a culture where if we didn't do that ourselves, our parents probably did, right? Stayed at their parents' house for a while. Does that sound familiar? Staying with, yeah. I think some of us would have that cultural background where. But anyway, he would not just stay in any room at his father's house. He would build a room onto his father's house. And the usual practice was for a young man to return to his father's house and build a honeymoon room there. This is what is symbolized by the chuppah, or canopy, that is characteristic of Jewish weddings. That is still practiced today in a lot of Jewish weddings. The bride and groom will stand under a little canopy, and that is to signify this honeymoon room. He was not allowed to skimp on the work and had to get his father's approval before he could consider it ready for his bride. If asked the date of his wedding, he would have to reply, "Only my father knows." Does that sound familiar again? That's what Jesus said, right? No one knows the day or the hour except the Father who is in heaven, because Jesus is going home to create this room to take us onto himself, to take the church home with him. Meanwhile, the bride would be making herself ready so that she would be pure and beautiful for her bridegroom. During this time, she would wear a veil when she went out to show she was spoken for. That is kind of what nowadays a girl would go out and she'd show off her engagement ring. I'm raising this hand. Actually, it would be right here, right in the left hand. She'd show off, "Look, I'm got this engagement ring," and all the other young ladies would look on with envy. So anyway, okay, and then there'd be the wedding. When the wedding chamber was ready, the bridegroom would collect his bride. He would do this at any time, so the bride would make special arrangements. It was the custom for a bride to keep a lamp, her veil, and her other things beside her bed. Her bridesmaids were also waiting and had to have oil ready for their lamps, because this could be at any time. Nobody knew. It could be at night, it could be during the day. Nobody knew, so they had to have lamps ready to light the way for the bride and groom. When the groom and his friends got close to the bride's house, they would give a shout and blow a trumpet to let her know to be ready. When the wedding party arrived at the father's house, the newlyweds went into the wedding chamber for a 7-day honeymoon. All the friends celebrated for the 7 days that the couple were honeymooning. When the couple emerged, there would be much congratulation, and the marriage supper could begin. Now, let's read the text. Matthew 25, verses 1 through 13. "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. For when the foolish ones took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise ones took oil in jars along with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom was taking a long time, they all got drowsy and started falling asleep. But in the middle of the night there was a shout, 'Look, the bridegroom, come out to meet him.' Then all those virgins got up and trimmed their lamps. Then the foolish ones said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, since our lamps are going out.' But the wise ones replied, 'No, there won't be enough for us and you. Instead, go out to those who sell and buy some for yourselves.' But while they were going off to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. Now later, the other virgins also came, saying, 'Sir, sir, open up for us.' But he replied, 'Amen, I tell you, I do not know you. Therefore, stay alert, for you do not know neither the day nor the hour.'" Now, the people who heard Jesus telling this parable would have had no problem understanding what was going on there. They understood these kinds of weddings. This parable would have made perfect sense to them. So because of our cultural differences, some of these things aren't as clear to us. So anyway, the context of telling this parable is a series of prophecies that Jesus made about the coming destruction of this earth as we know it, and also of the coming judgment. And so Jesus summarizes each of the contextual parables with an urgent call for preparation, to be ready for when this comes. And so the question for us this morning is, are you ready? Are you ready for that midnight cry? Are you ready for that call, behold, the bridegroom is coming? And that's something that we all have to deal with. Are you ready to die? That sounds kind of morbid, but it is a question that we have to deal with. Are you ready to die? Are you ready to stand before a righteous judge after you die? Or maybe for some of us, it'll be before we die. We'll stand before a righteous judge. So let's look at some of these things that we need to be ready for. Let's look at the first one. Are you ready? Are you ready in case we were to fall on spiritually hard times? If, let's say, the government started making it hard for Christians, or harder for Christians to assemble, to worship, and to live out our faith, would we be ready to stand in the face of any kind of persecution? Are we spiritually ready? Do we have a personal conviction for things beyond what has just been taught us from our childhood? Do we have a personal, strong belief that would hold up under torture, under severe interrogation and manipulation? Do we have a strong enough faith that would hold up under that? Are we ready for this kind of thing? Because right now, there is still time to get ready for this kind of thing. But we need to have a personal conviction. Just riding on the coattails of our fellow believers is not going to cut it in a time like that. Excuse me. When this COVID pandemic hit, many people realized how woefully unprepared they were for hard times. You could have seen this in a quick trip to a grocery store or the Walmart or anywhere. It was evident. Well, or even Thanksgiving, or just before anything like that, people aren't prepared. People don't have anything stored up in case of emergency. So anything comes up, they have to run to the grocery store, run to the Walmart or Dollar General in a panic and buy up things because they're not ready. And so we saw a little glimpse of that. And is that going to be the way it's going to be when the Lord comes the second time? That people are going to rush off to the stores? Now, I don't know. If God calls us home via a rapture and we're all just disappear, there's not going to be any time for that kind of thing, right? There's not going to be a time, hey, pray for me, so or I'm going to quick run to the grocery store, whatever. There's not going to be any time for that kind of thing. So we got to be ready at all times. So, okay, back to this COVID pandemic. We saw things that were getting sold out. And then this kind of phenomenon repeats itself every time there's a storm in the forecast, any ice or snow or anything like that. Then people rush to the stores to go get salt or to salt down their driveways, or they run to get extra bread or whatever. They run out and buy up stuff because they're not prepared. That should not be said of us spiritually, that we are unprepared. When hard times start coming, that all of a sudden we start trying to hurry up and fill ourselves spiritually so we're going to be prepared. We should be prepared all the time because we don't know when anything's going to happen like this. So, spiritual hard times, how prepared are we? Is our faith strong, or do we easily buckle when the pressures of this life push in on us? Do we easily collapse? Does our faith collapse? Do we just forget all about it and just go into a panic? Or do we stand firm on those promises that we claim to stand firm on when times are good? Ephesians 6 verses 10 to 11. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Excuse me. Do you know and understand the Bible to the point where you would be able to keep your faith, even if your Bible was taken away from you and you were separated from your fellow believers? I don't believe persecution in this country is going to come in the form of denounce Jesus or die, or denounce God or die. I don't think we're going to see that kind of persecution. It's going to come in a much more subtle form, and it's going to chip away at the core of our beliefs. It's going to chip away at things. It's going to be on technicalities. If we're going to get persecuted, it's going to be on technicalities. If we look at back, those of us that are descendants of the Anabaptists or the Reformation, I think that's maybe almost all of us would have some background if we trace that back. But I think a lot of us gathered here, we could literally, thank you, we could literally trace our family line back to the Anabaptists of Martin Luther's day or Menno Simon's day, and those people were killed by the government and by the church for things that, okay, it's things like infant baptism. Some of these preachers were going around saying you have to be baptized upon the confession of your faith. I think that is clear to every one of us. That's how it should be done, right? We should be baptized on our faith. So these people were baptizing infants, and so they would rebaptize these people once they got old enough to understand and they wanted to have a relationship with Jesus, or they came to Jesus, or Jesus reached down and grabbed a hold of these people. These people were baptized, and they were called Anabaptists because they were rebaptized. Okay, so they were being tortured, hunted down, tortured, and killed for that. And you could think, well, what's the big deal? Why not just bypass this whole thing? Why create such a stir over that thing? Because is baptism absolutely necessary? I mean, yeah, they've been baptized as kids. I mean, like, you could easily explain a lot of things away if that was your intention to do so. So it's not going to be denounce Jesus or die, or denounce God or die. That would be too easy. I don't think that's going to happen in our lifetimes. It's going to be done by things that people are going to try to reason away the very core of your beliefs till there's really nothing left. Okay. Before the bridegroom comes, there are going to be hard times, and there are going to be dark times, and there's going to be all kinds of unrest in the world before this bridegroom comes again. And our lamps are going to have to remain lit and burning. We're going to have this faith is going to have to stay alive, and we're going to have lots of faith for this to stay alive through these dark times. And we must have extra oil of faith and a love for God with us at all times, or our lamps are going to go dark in in those hours preceding that midnight cry. 2 Timothy 3 verses 1 through 5 say, "But understand this, that in the last days hard times will come. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, hard-hearted, unforgiving, backbiting, without self-control, brutal, hating what is good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to an outward form of godliness, but denying its power. Avoid these people." In Isaiah 5 verse 20, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who present darkness as light and light as darkness, who present bitter as sweet and sweet as bitter." I remember this last verse, Isaiah 5 verse 20, growing up, I would hear this verse quoted sometimes, and I would always be amazed by it. I'm like, what a messed up world that would be. When people called evil good and good evil. I didn't get that. Like, how could anybody do that? Well, we've arrived, right? We've arrived at that time. People are calling evil good, and good is called evil. And we are there. So are we ready for these hard times? Are we ready and willing to suffer persecution for our faith? Do we have a deep enough faith to where do we even have anything that we could be persecuted for? Like, are we standing firm enough on anything that we would be persecuted for that? When that time comes, it may be too late to try to build up our faith build up our supply with that oil of faith. I was at a few weeks ago, I was at a funeral, and a guy named Joe Wilson. He's a gentleman that was very instrumental in building that chapel at the Boley prison. He was actually the one who organized the whole thing, and the one who organized all the fundraisers for it. And I mean, he was the one who, without him, it wouldn't have happened. And Joe Wilson passed away. Well, Joe Wilson knew that his time had come. And I was at this funeral, and it was an amazing funeral. I'd never been to one quite like that. And Joe was an incredibly organized person. Everything had to be lined up and in order. And he knew that his time was coming. He knew that he was on his deathbed. He was in the hospital. He knew that he was on his deathbed. And he organized. He put things in order. And he even planned his own funeral right down to the smallest details. I mean, I think he had 5 speakers at his funeral. And he had the topics that these guys were supposed to speak on. He had the times, how long each one was supposed to speak. And he said, this funeral is not supposed to last for more than 45 minutes. And no crying about me. And I don't want anybody to say, I'm so sorry that he's gone. I just want everybody to rejoice with the work that I've done in my life. And I want everybody just to be happy I'm at my reward. And he said, there's no feeling sorry or anything like that. And it was an amazing funeral. I mean, he literally had 5 speakers, and everybody knew better than to go over their time at Joe's funeral. And so the thing just went like clockwork. And it was really, like, Joe was an amazing person. I mean, I knew that when he was alive, and I found that out just at his funeral as well. But not all of us will have that luxury. And I believe he had his life in order with God too. He was a devout Christian man, and he had his life in order. I'm sure he spent more time getting his life in order with God. He made a lot of phone calls from his deathbed. If there was anything that he felt that he might have wronged anybody, he made everything. I mean, he was a very organized man. We may not all have that luxury. We may not have the luxury of a deathbed conversion even. So do you have your life in order if you should be taken suddenly? This is something that it's a question that we have to grapple with today while we are still here. We need to know, we need to find out, do we have our lives in order in case we should be taken suddenly? Hebrews 3 verse 15 says, today if you will hear His voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. When that trumpet calls, behold, here comes the bridegroom. Then it's over. Then your last chapter has been written. If you don't have extra oil with you, you're going to be left outside that room, and you're not going to be going into that wedding chamber. And it's interesting that that these all 10 of these young ladies, it says there was 10 virgins, so they're all pure. Their lives are all pure. They're all waiting for the bridegroom, and they're all sleeping. So that doesn't seem to be the problem, the fact that they were sleeping. But it was the fact that they didn't have, 5 of them did not have extra oil with them. So what is this oil? And I've been pondering this for the last quite a while. What is this oil that is talking about? Because they all had enough faith to be waiting for the bridegroom. They all had that much faith. They were all waiting, but 5 of them didn't have enough of something. 5 of them didn't have a relationship with God. They didn't have a relationship with the bridegroom, because when they came to the door, the bridegroom said, I never knew you. I don't even know who you are. So who were those 5 people? Is it those people who try to earn their own salvation on their own merits, and they have nothing outside of themselves that gives them salvation? Is it perhaps that? That was the only conclusion I could come up with. It's a real faith in God's grace. If we don't have that faith in God's grace, if it's anything less than that, then God doesn't know us. God doesn't know us if we're just trying to earn our salvation by our own works or on our own merits. We have to grab a hold of that faith. That we have to have faith in this grace that God has extended to us, and not of ourselves. See, it had to be something outside of the lamp. They had to have extra oil outside that lamp. Otherwise, this lamp's going to go out. And isn't that the same with our faith? Our faith can't be in our own works. It has to be in something much bigger than that. It has to be something, our faith has to be in something that's not going to burn up as quickly as what we have in ourselves. We can't have faith in our own works. It has to be something else. And that faith, that oil, I believe, is that grace that God extends to us. If we don't have that grace in our lives, if we don't have a faith in that grace, then God's not going to know us because He doesn't recognize our works. He requires us to have these works, but He doesn't recognize. That's not how we gain God's favor, is by our works. Okay. Anyway, let's go on. Are you ready for the judgment? Let's say we have everything lined up. Let's say Joe Wilson had everything lined up, had his funeral all planned out, everything lined up, and everything went off without a hitch. But if he wasn't ready for judgment, all of that was just nothing, right? I mean, it was, maybe people remember him as that guy who had a perfect funeral, but that's about it, right? For eternity, nobody's going to know him. And so, are you ready for the judgment? He had to be ready for the judgment as well. Standing in front of a human judge here on this earth is intimidating. But standing in front of a righteous God, a righteous judge, that's downright frightening, isn't it? Unless we have an advocate, unless we have this grace that has been extended to us through Jesus Christ, and Jesus is advocating for us. Otherwise, it is a terrifying experience. And we have to get a hold of that grace, and that faith in Jesus Christ and His grace. We need an intercessor. We need somebody who can save us from this condemnation. The only way that we're going to get into that marriage supper is if we know the bridegroom. If we have a relationship with the bridegroom. The bridegroom has paid a great price for us. He has given us everything we need, and He has given His own life for us. He laid down His life for us. Why would we not serve Him if He has done that much for us, right? He has laid down His life for us. Have we accepted that cup that has been set before us? Now that cup could be suffering. Jesus asked Peter, "Can you drink the cup that I set before you? That's set before you. Can you drink the cup that I'm drinking?" And Peter's like, "Oh yeah, I can do that." Well, he couldn't. And Peter was a strong man, but he couldn't drink that cup that was before Jesus. Well, not till after Jesus died. Afterwards, he was able to, and Jesus also told him, "You will drink of this cup that I'm drinking." But anyway, can we drink of that cup? Are we willing? Are we willing to take that cup and drink and be the bride of Jesus Christ, knowing that it's going to cost us everything also. But it's going to cost us everything, but we're going to gain many, many more times anything that we are going to lose through this. We're not going to lose anything. We may lay down our life for it, but Jesus laid down His life for us, right? If we drink this cup that is set before us, our lives are going to be radically transformed. Our lives are not going to just keep going the way they were. Oh, I've always been a good person. Things are, even if you always were a good person, which no one is good, but let's say you were, by human standards, always been a good person, your transformation, when you drink of that cup, is going to be radical. People around you are going to see it. It's going to be there's going to be a noticeable difference in you if you drink that cup. You're no longer going to do the same things you did before, no longer going to have the same interests you had before. Things are going to be a lot different. We will spend our lives eagerly waiting the return of the bridegroom. We will keep our affairs in order because we have not been given a day or an hour. And people are always guessing at this. Oh, I think he'll come back here. I think he'll come back here. I think he'll come back in November. I heard somebody saying that a while back. I think, I've done my calculations, and I think Jesus is going to come back this year in November. Guess what? Someday, one of these guys is going to get it right. Because there's always a day when somebody's prophesying that this will be the day. Someday, one of them is going to get it right? Is that going to make that person a real prophet? No, because Jesus says, I don't even know. Because when the Father says, this room is ready, then Jesus is going to come back. And He's going to come gather us to Himself in heaven. And we're going to sit down at this marriage supper. And it's going to be way better than anything that we had at any Thanksgiving dinner with our friends and family. So let's keep our affairs in order because we don't know when. Let's keep our spiritual lives in order. If there's anything that you need to make right with your neighbor, if there's anything that you would not want to face God with, let's make it right. God's grace is big enough to save us from anything, but let's not leave unfinished garbage here on this earth when we leave. And so, Matthew 24, verse 36, but of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, except the Father alone. Are you ready for that midnight cry? That's something. Let's ask ourselves that. Are we ready for that midnight cry? If Jesus Christ was going to come back, do we have extra oil in our lamps? Do we have that oil in our lamps? And let's study this. Let's find out what this means for us, what God is saying to us through this passage. And let's do some real soul searching. Are we ready for that midnight cry?
Heavenly Father, we just come to this morning, God, and thank you for who you are, what you do for us, and just thank you for dying for